Here's the bowl that we made last week, and we are going to go ahead and get this trimmed, and we're going to use the water tension technique with a little twist. So if that's something that you want to see, stick around and find out what it is. I just marked it. So we got our piece. Right now, as you can see, it is still on the bat. It is still fairly stuck. So what we're going to do is we're going to wire it off, and we're going to pop it off the bat. And oftentimes my students struggle with this, so I'm going to go and show you how I like to approach it so that this bowl, especially because the rim is thin, doesn't get warped. So we got our wire, and some people were asking about this wire. This is just some washers, metal washers with some 40-pound test fishing line, and I picked neon green so that it's easily spotted, especially if it's left in the clay buckets. And it's a little dirty, so I'm gonna rinse it. And I prefer these guys over the wire, the metal wire, because they're just a lot more forgiving on your fingers, and it's easier to hold because I make them shorter, and you can put them between your ring finger and your pinky, so the washer's on the outside, pull it taut, and when you squeeze, it's not wrapped around your hand, so it doesn't feel like you're cutting your fingers as you pull. So I will make a video on how to make these guys, and maybe a tips and tricks on making your own tools videos in the future. But anyway, these are what I like. Pull it taut, and then let's go ahead and get this wired off again. And it is very dry. You can see I'm kind of struggling. The downside with these plastic fishing line wires are, if you are cutting a piece that's too dry, you can easily snap this. So just be mindful, this is best for cutting wet clay. Alright, so I cut it going this way. Let's pop it up going the opposite way. So as I cut this way, you want to pop it off where the wire touches the clay last, and it should release fairly easily. And so I'm going to go ahead and pop this off. And we're going to switch this bat out, and we're actually going to put this on a clean bat. So if I were to pick it up and try to flip, I would most likely warp this rim because it's so wide and the bottom's much heavier. So my recommendation, whenever you throw wide rimmed pieces, just get another board, put it on top, and then sandwich it between the two. And then when you flip it, you just place one hand under one hand over the other, and then rotate. And then you can easily remove the top after you wire it, of course. You can clean this when you have time. And now we just put this on the bat pegs, wheel pegs, and now we just center this like we normally would. So first thing I'm going to do is just kind of remove all those extra cut burrs. Normally for the water tension technique, if this was my piece, I'll get my wet sponge, I'd wipe the rim, wipe the board, put it on, wiggle, and then push it to center. But I saw another technique in a video where they tap center, put a little bit of water on a brush and brush the rim and then tap. So we're going to go ahead and try it. And if it works, then centering will be that much easier because I can tap center, which is faster, and then I don't need to really worry about the rim getting warped too much. Okay, spin it slowly. And then we'll go ahead, get my left hand on top. Every time the wheel moves into my right hand, I'm going to keep that count and gently tap it. And then one thing to remember, because this bowl is fairly thin at the rim, I don't want to be tapping it at the rim because I could definitely dent it. I'll tap it at the base where the clay is thicker. But those taps already got it centered, so this is pretty much good to go. I'm going to get a brush some water on the rim, tap it down, and hopefully it stays stuck. Alright, got my brush. Let's get some water. And then brush some water at the rim where the clay meets it. Hopefully that's enough moisture for it to get stuck. So I haven't tried this technique before with just the brushing, but we'll see if it helps. Okay, and then tap. Yeah, feels pretty stuck to me. Alright, so let's go ahead and get started. And I may have showed you guys this technique in the beginning, but my bottom right here is slightly uneven. There's a little more burrs on one side than the other. So one thing that may help you guys when you start trimming, now this is not necessarily required, but if you take your needle and then you draw a circle, or you just push it down to draw a line, everything on the outside of the line is off center. Everything on the inside of the line is centered. So when you trim, you can use this as your guide. Now, if you want to take it one step further, you can take your needle and then just push it straight down and you start cutting into the clay. And if you push down enough, you can cut all the way through, and then you can end up removing that unevenness. So we'll slice that off. And then you more or less have a true centered edge at the top. So you know everything should match that as you trim it inward. And then of course you just get your normal trimming tool. And because it's just secure with water tension, I do like to put a little indent here. This allows my finger to go in. And then you just take your favorite trimming tool, and then you just apply light pressure to where that outermost edge is to recenter that to your new centered line. And right there, I have it more or less centered. So this could just be my foot itself. I am planning to trim in a little bit more, but not much because I don't want it too narrow. And then trim the bottom, and it's going to be a really fast trimming session. So yeah, it's basically centered. And if you like this, you could be more or less done. But I'm going to go ahead and start taking off clay a little more from the outside. And so just like in my previous trimming videos, I really like this curve here, but I don't want to trim this too far in, and I don't want it to have a really abrupt angle change. So what you can do to extend this clay wall going up is you match the angle of where this is, you elevate it to roughly where you want to start trimming into the foot, and then you just kind of start trimming that edge down. So it kind of creates a little undercut. And once you trim it down enough and you match the height of where your clay wall is, you are essentially extending your clay wall into the foot section. And because I know that this bottom, at least this outermost edge, is fairly thick, I have a lot of clay to work with. And so I'm going to go ahead and actually use these other trimming tools. And this is by a company called Bushcraft, and he makes a bunch of different tools, carving tools, trimming tools. And the cool thing about these, they're magnetic and they're interchangeable. So once this blade goes dull, right now it's incredibly sharp, you just pop off these silicone handles, which are magnetic, and you take out the blade, and you can easily replace them. And so I did buy these with my own money. They were not the most cheap set. It was about $100, but the sharpness of these tools are just incredible. And you may have seen this one being used to shave off glaze, and I really like this for shaving off glaze. But anyway, I'm going to use these guys because these straight edges are wonderful. So if I create my angle that I like, and then I start to kind of push this in, and then I just gently push it down, just like with that larger trimming tool, I'm essentially extending my foot. I can't talk today. I'm essentially extending my clay wall to go into my foot, like I said before. And then I just take this extra edge, and then I just come in at a bevel, and then just take that off. And you can see how sharp this tool is. It's taking the trimmings off like little thin shavings, and it's so sharp. And I love this tool when I'm taking off a large amount because it's just effortless. Now I do notice this tool can chatter if you hold it at an angle that kind of creates vibration. So with any new trimming tool, you just got to get used to it, but it's so sharp, it's so easy to use, and I'm really excited whenever Bushcraft comes out with new trimming tools. So if I hold it at a higher angle, it actually will shave a little more. You can see how it just comes off, and it's just taking micro layers off. It's so nice. But anyway, I'm not sponsored, so Bushcraft Studio or Bushcraft Tools, I would love to work with you because your tools are great. And I'll leave a link to these tools in the description below too. All right, anyway, that's more or less the shape that I want. Now I can start trimming the inside, and I notice actually over here it's a little too like square for my liking. I want it more round, so I can go ahead and take that off a little bit, and it will change my texture over there. So I will have to go back and then reapply if I want it more pronounced. But a little light shaving, a little light trimming, and this edge is more or less perfect. And that curve matches much, much better. All right, now let's tackle the foot. So I'm going to go ahead and switch this out to the curved one. And trimming the inside is more or less the same that we always do. Actually, I'm gonna put this in my tool holder. Just gotta be careful. These things are so sharp. Like, I'm glad I haven't cut myself on it, but I know I probably will eventually. And the cool thing is with this curved one, you can trim with the whole edge and both sides. And so this is basically the loop tool. If I go and use this side in the center, it's so sharp, it's definitely pulling. So I have to be very, very careful with this. It can gouge if I'm too aggressive, or if I want to do a more wider surface. And this one I can feel some chattering occurring. So I'm still getting used to these tools. You can see on the texture on the camera above is creating some chatter marks. So anyone who uses Bushcraft tools, if you have any recommendations on avoiding the chatter, because like I said, I'm still getting used to it, let me know in the comments below. And it's a pretty cool texture. Let's see if I add some water, if that can help. And I think the water did help, but now everything's kind of sticky. But anyway, I'm gonna put this away, and I'm gonna go back and use my normal trimming tool. And these things are a lot less sharp, but they're tried and true. They're very basic. Every potter has gone through using these at least once in their career. And so I just know that it works. And I usually always go back to these eventually, because I'm just so used to them. I'm a creature of habit. I always go back to what I like. So tapping every once in a while. I do know I threw this middle section a little thinner than I would have wanted, so I can't take off too much. Apologies for the plane flying over. So I can go a little deeper. Okay, probably can't go too much deeper than that. But over here, I know it's very, very thick. And so if you're wondering, why am I tapping like this is a good habit to get into, because as you are trimming, it's hard to know exactly how thick the clay wall is. And so by putting a finger down and tapping to create vibration, also sound, the more vibration you feel, the thinner the clay is. So as you trim many pieces over time, you get to know the small nuances of the vibration as you tap. And as I was tapping, this is actually thinner than up here, so I definitely don't want to go thinner here. But I can go more on this section, so I can start removing a lot more in this area. So because I'm removing a lot more, let's go back and switch. And I haven't used this one yet today. And this one's cool because it's a slight blade. And it's just so effortless using these things. And I'm kind of scared because it's so sharp. I know if I apply too much pressure, I'll definitely gouge the clay. So, like anything in life, it does take some practice to get used to. So we're going to clean up this inside edge, get a nice straight wall. If you want to see more ceramic videos, don't forget to like and subscribe. That way it helps grow the channel, and you'll be able to see these videos as they're released every week. And let's go ahead and check the thickness. Yeah, that feels pretty good. And so this is going to be a tall, triumphant foot. And normally when I trim, I always try to match the height of the foot here to the foot here. So as it slopes, if I were to cut this foot off, it should create a nice even curve. But I did throw the bottom a little thinner, and so it's much taller on the outside than it is the inside. And I could keep trimming a little more on the inside to make it match, but I'm afraid that I might start getting a little too thin and it'll break through. So I'm probably going to stop right here, because as I tap, It definitely is starting to get a little too thin, so I'll just take a little more off. And right there, or I trimmed a little too much. Right there, oh, I can feel some unevenness. So actually, I'm gonna level the top a little more. And so if you ever encounter trimming and you know that the top is taller than it is on one side than the other, you're going to want to shave it off sideways. And so you could just kind of trim down, but sometimes that just perpetuates the unevenness because you're trimming everything at the same rate. So instead, what I like doing is I take the two corners and I'm going to trim them inward to create a point, a bevel. So I take the outside, I trim this at an inwards angle, so 45 degrees. Then I do the same thing on the inside at a 45. And I keep repeating back and forth, inside, outside, until both come to a point. And then once they come to a point, let's take all this extra trimmings. So once it comes to a point, I know now that this point, this one singular point here, is the tallest part. And by feeling it, well, you can actually see it's wider in one section here. So I still have to take a little more off. So we'll go back and switch to the wider trimming tool. So once you have a singular point, or in this case a spine, that goes all the way around your piece, right there, you know that this is the tallest spot. So it's much easier to level this out because there's not as much surface area for you to cut through. And so what you can do is just start trimming this down now, but I have a preferred method, and that's using an X-Acto knife. So let me get that, and I'll show you how I level this out. Alright, so I got my X-Acto knife, and so what I'm going to do is I'm going to hold this level, and I'm going to cut into the piece, and I'm not going to cut at the very top. I'm going to cut about halfway down this slope here, so I can cut the highest point off, and everything below it should be level. And so the hardest part about doing this is making sure that when you cut inward, your hand is not drifting up or down, and it's just going straight in. So you can cut in from the side if you're comfortable, you can cut in from the front. I like doing it from the front just because I'm a little more used to it, and I can brace up against the splash pan like this. So I'm going to hold it, this looks pretty level, and then I'm going to go ahead and start cutting and pushing this in ever so slightly and slowly. And once I reach the other side, I can then just lift the tool up, peel it away, and now when I feel it, I know that is true and flat and level. And then I just take my trimming tool, and then I just remove the burrs. And then once I round this out, it'll be perfectly level. I'm going to trim this a little more thin on the inside. I don't want it too bulky. And I'm going to take a little bit more on the outside to hopefully make it a little less tall and goofy looking. So I'm going to do that same angle technique, going to float this tool, going to bring it down, make it match the wall of the piece, and then kind of just trim this down a little bit. Then I'm going to leave that little undercut on the bottom. Yeah, so a little less tall, it looks better. And I'm going to trim into here, creating that undercut, that roundness to make it a little more elegant, a little more flair, some uniqueness to this foot. And this also allows me to easily grip the foot like this when I trim, or when I glaze. So I'm not going to take too much off, just a little bit to add some curve. This also has the wax. It helps the wax that sticks a little better to this curve. And this little edge right here, this lip, I don't want it too sharp because that is prone to chipping. So I'm just going to kind of just round that out a little bit. But I got to make sure not to round it out too much, or it just kind of defeats the purpose of the lip because I won't be able to grip it. Alright, that looks pretty good. Let's go ahead and clean up the trimmings. We'll dip this in water and then just lightly apply pressure to collect any trimmings that were stuck. Looks like some got stuck in the corner here. Also because I did apply a little more pressure, so it took a little more off. And then burnishing, final smoothing. So we'll take our brush, get it into that corner first. and then use a sponge to then apply pressure everywhere else. Around the foot, around the inside. And around the base. Not round, sorry, burnish, smooth. And then the clay wall, it does have some light trimming marks. So I'm just going to soften that. Alright, and then lastly are the burrs on the outside of the piece. You can see like right here has a large burr that I want to remove. So let's get the trimming tool and just gently start shaving off those high spots. And you can just smooth this out with a sponge if you want, but I have this new fun tool, so I want to make use of it. And I'll go back with a sponge after. And after 10 minutes of searching, well, not really 10, like a few minutes, I found my soft sponge. This is a Mud Tools sponge, and it's awesome because it's so soft. And right now it's incredibly dry. It shrinks quite a bit. But the moment you get some water and you drop it in, you can hear that from the overhead. You can see it in the overhead cam too, starting to get hydrated. And now it's actually a little more flexible. I'm gonna get a little more wet, and it's super soft. It's great for finishing. It doesn't hold very much water, but it's really, really soft. The downside of these sponges are they are quite pricey, but they are perfect for smoothing without roughing up your clay too much. And I do like them for smoothing my texture lines and softening them so it's not as abrasive. And then I go back with my finger to kind of buff it out. And of course, lots of airplanes flying over, only when I film. I just love to interrupt our trimming sessions and throwing sessions. But we're gonna go ahead, I'll continue smoothing, and don't really need to see much of this, but we'll get this done, and then we'll get this popped off and have another tip that was given in the comments on how to easily pop these off. So I'm excited to try it, so stick around for that part. Now, if I were to pop it off or lift it up, this is definitely stuck. The bat is moving more. And so what some people said is you actually just hit the bat or the wheel head, and it looks like it released. Wow, yeah, it did. Wow, that worked great. So if you do the water tension technique and you do the brush, that extra added tip, and then you just whack it, it should easily release. And I'm going to go ahead and flip this back to my other board, and let's see if the rim is still nice and round. Get underneath, and let's flip. All right, moment of truth, everybody. It still looks pretty round, not that much sticking to this. And this piece is done. So we got our 4-pound ball thrown into a large bowl. Now it's a little stuck to the bottom because it's wet, but that'll easily release when it's dry. And so let's get some final measurements. All right, so I don't remember what this was thrown in the wet form in the last video. I'll put it up on the screen here when I can play it back. But now the dimensions, because someone did ask how much it shrinks from start to finish, and this clay itself, B-mix, aardvark, B-mix with sand, shrinks about 11%. So from the throwing size to the now trimming leather hard, it is about 9 inches wide by a little more than 4.5. So apologies for the outdated US measurements. I'm not good in centimeters and meters, but I do know that system is much better. But anyway, We'll see how much this shrinks. I just marked it, but we'll see how much this shrinks after the bisque firing and then finally the glaze firing. And I do plan to do a video on glazing this because I haven't really glazed a big piece for YouTube anyway, but I'm very happy the way this turned out. And there's another plane flying, so a nice triumphant foot, nice texture lines. We'll let this dry out, pop it in the kiln, and then we will glaze it. So if you folks want to see the glazing video when it's released, don't forget to like and subscribe so you can see that video come out when it's released. And I do want to say thank you to all the Mud Club members. I hope you're accessing the document that shows all of the videos in a nice and organized manner. And if you would like to join the Mud Club, the description has all the information you need and all the perks that you receive by joining. So anyway, I hope you enjoyed this short trimming video, and I hope to see you folks in the next one. Have a good one.